It's time, Fort Wayne. Your sports, your station. It's the Sports Rush with Brett Rump. Covering all the topics that hit a nerve here in the Summit City.
Clark, 11 yards, touchdown.
Only on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Now here's your host, Brett Rump.
The greatest, most interesting, most important person of all time.
You are incredible.
Fordham was.
Yeah, well, you're half right.
What is this, amateur hour?
This is going to be huge.
I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Just when I think you've said the stupidest thing ever, you keep talking.
I think that's the worst thing I've ever heard.
That boy ain't right.
The simplest way to put it, I have problems.
Welcome to the alleged show.
Here we go, taking you home on a Monday. It is the Sports Rush, your daily local sports fix, 4 to 6. I am Brett Rump along with Adam Lundy, and we've got you connected on the Parkview Sports Medicine text line at 260-447-8500. We also are joining you on Facebook today. We've got the live stream. You can actually watch the show by going to facebook.com/1380thefan. So you can follow along two ways. You can leave comments two ways, both on the Facebook comment section next to the video or by texting us at 260-447-8500. Big show today. Of course, plenty of talk about the NCAA tournament, but also coming up in hour number 2, we talk to Don Fisher, legendary Hall of Fame voice of the Indiana Hoosiers. He will join us to talk about the hiring of Darren DeVries as the new Indiana basketball coach. Also the transfer portal, which opened up today. There's some more names that are popping into it, probably as we speak. Mackenzie Mbako, the next big name to enter the transfer portal. Is that breaking news?
It's news that's happened since our last show, and I wanted to hit the button, so it's
Let's
breaking.
get this show started with some breaking news. Mackenzie Mbako entering the transfer portal, also plans to enter the NBA draft on an exploratory basis. Of course, I don't know what the NBA would be lining up to get out of Mackenzie Mbako, a guy that has a lot of defensive efficiency, is not a great rebounder, cannot guard a guard. In fact, quite honestly, doesn't play much defense. And I think he's still got a lot to prove that he is worthy of a selection in the NBA draft. But, I mean, I could see Mackenzie Mbako being a G League player.
Yeah, if that's what you want to be. But I think personally you would rather want to get another year of NIL deals over G League.
I was just going to bring up that point that the G League is not going to pay anywhere near what Indiana can fork over in NIL money.
Yeah.
And so it does kind of surprise me. And, you know, we're going to talk to Don Fisher about this, too, about Malik Renew and the fact that Indiana's got one of the most loaded NIL funds out of any team out there, and yet you've got one of their better players that's entering the portal. What is he looking for? Somebody that's got more money? Because it just doesn't make sense to me. Is it about the coach? Is it his loyalty to Mike Woodson? Remember, Mike Woodson was a guy who kind of, I don't want to say saved him, but they had Jalen Hood-Schifino, and he was coming, and teammate Malik Renew did not have a college, and Mike Woodson, kind of a late offer and signing to Indiana basketball, and maybe Malik Renew felt loyal to Mike Woodson and is making a statement about his displeasure on the situation with Mike Woodson. I don't know, but maybe Malik Renew patches things up with the new coach, decides Indiana's the place to stay. You know, there's different situations for different players. Sometimes, you know, it's best that someone who's looking for greener pastures moves on. And sometimes it might be the next coach coming in and saying, we really want you to stay. We see you as a fit in this new program that we're bringing to Indiana. And I think that's what Coach DeVries and Mackenzie Mbako have to sit down and talk about, whether or not it's going to be a fit and whether it's going to work. And sit down with Malik Renew, have the same conversation, see if it's going to be a fit. But and maybe Mbako was thinking all the hype about Tucker DeVries And is he going to come in and have my spot? I don't know. Averaged 12 points a game, 4.6 rebounds, 1.1 assists last year for Indiana, but only 33% three-point range and only 44% of the field overall. Not great numbers to be a top NBA prospect, but anyway, that's the latest news. It's breaking news, according to Adam.
Hey, I just wanted to hit the button, but like I said, I don't know why he's testing the NBA waters at all, maybe just to see from the scouts how far away he is from playing at a professional level, but I think he should learn from example why we saw from Jalen Hood-Schifino. I mean, he had a cup of coffee with the Lakers, but now he's in the G League with the 76ers, the Delaware Bluecoats, and I don't think that's what you want right now, especially with what you can get in NIL.
It's such an unknown area because you have guys like Jalen Hood-Schifino that's on that border on the fence, whether he should or shouldn't. And then you have guys like Khalil Ware, who he ends up making the most of his opportunity in the NBA, and he's having a solid season, and he's productive for Miami. So you just never know. But wild weekend in the NCAA tournament because there was nothing wild about it. That's what made it kind of unique, was most of it was chalk.
The lack of wild is what made it wild, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, the game last night with Maryland, that was really the big drama. But other than that, a lot of games that were decided by comfortable margins. There were a couple of comebacks. There were a couple of big comebacks where teams that were down double digits ended up winning by double digits. So, but all in all, most of the top seeds advance. In the men, you had all four number 1 seeds, 3 of the number 2 seeds, 2 of the number 3 seeds, and 3 of the number 4 seeds that all make up part of the Sweet 16. That leaves only 4 other teams. And one of them's a 5 seed, 2 of them are a 6 seed. And then you've got that one team sitting out there coached by John Calipari. And so you got a coach who might deserve a higher seeding than his team did, but Arkansas, the number 10 seed, they're also part of the Sweet 16. So in some ways, it's kind of as expected. You had a couple of 6s that knocked off a couple of 3s. You had a 5-4 matchup that went to the 5. So all in all, actually, I don't even know if it was the 5. Was it the no? It was the 4, Purdue, and they ended up getting the win over McNeese State because McNeese State knocked off Clemson.
There you go. Follow along with all that.
Was Purdue a 4 or 5?
Purdue is, I believe they're a 4, but don't count me out for it.
I'm just wanting to make sure. Yeah, Purdue's the 4.
Yep.
And that means Clemson was the 5.
Yeah, they lost.
And they lost. So that meant in the 5-12 matchup, the 12 advanced. Purdue got to play the 12, and they ended up against McNeese State. And everybody thought that was the Cinderella of the tournament.
No, sir. Mr. Amir Khan, Mr. Boombox Kid, Mr. Will Wade, who's out of there now, off to the Wolfpack.
Indiana dodged a bullet by not having Brad Brownell as the next head coach because that Clemson team was totally not prepared for what McNeese did.
No, I mean, they weren't prepared to play at all. At 13 points in the first half, that's just not good.
And what a job by Purdue to be prepared for exactly what McNeese was trying to force you to do on the offensive end. And I think, this situation, I think a lot of teams, when they scout, they're always looking at the other team's offense. What do they run? What are their play calls? How are we going to defend and stop what they do offensively? But here's a situation where Purdue has an offensive coach and a defensive coach. And so the offensive coach, P.J. Thompson, he puts together a game plan of how to attack the McNeese defense. And so in the scout, they found holes that McNeese liked to double. They also left some vulnerability in the post on some pick and rolls, some ball screens. And so the game plan for Purdue offensively was executed perfectly. It led to a big game for Trey Kaufman-Renn. It led to Purdue hitting some three-point shots where they got really good looks. And Matt Painter explained it after the game, and he said, we went in with a very clear game plan of how we wanted to execute against what McNeese does defensively and what they do really well to put their opponents into awkward positions. We wanted to avoid those spots. And so they were very conscious of when McNeese liked to double team. They were able to get the ball out of double teams early. But the other thing he said was, you've got to make the catch at the three-point line. And that was very important, and it was emphasized that you cannot make the catch 3 or 4 feet behind the three-point line, because then McNeese can adjust and rotate and get to you to take away a good look at a decent range three. Sure, you could take the long one from 29 feet, but what Matt Painter's saying is you got to be in a position where you can be somewhat of a triple threat, where you can immediately pass it, you can drive it, or you can shoot it. And you only do that if you're actually at the three-point line. And so they worked very hard to make sure they were making their catches at the three-point line. And the other point of emphasis, besides the post play and getting the ball to the post, was on the perimeter, make the extra pass, that they will scramble and they will take away on that double team. They will take away that first pass because they rotate. But when they rotate, they're rotating a guy from the weak side, leaving the next pass wide open. And it happened time and time again for Purdue, where they got really good three-point looks because they were prepared for exactly how McNeese was going to defend them, and they were prepared to execute to maximize their offense against that defense. And what a job. And that's just coaching. Great, not only assistant coaching, who did the scouting, but Matt Painter, who identified it and helped put together a game plan to execute against it. And so Purdue never threatened by McNeese State. All the things McNeese State did that handcuffed Clemson. And it was funny because I went back and watched some of that Clemson game and realized all those things that Matt Painter was talking about. Once you knew what he was saying, Clemson was making the catches 28, 29, 30 feet. They were a good 4 or 5 feet behind the three-point line. The other thing is they would attack on the dribble as opposed to making the extra pass. So you'd get the double team. They'd pass out of the double team. The guy would make the catch. He would give a shot fake, but he wasn't much of a threat to shoot because he was 4 feet behind the three-point line. Then he would go to drive. Well, the defender, knowing that he's probably not likely to actually take that three, didn't get fooled by the shot fake. Then they would drive right into traffic, and by the time then they would try to get the pass out to the open wing, they were in another double team right in the middle of the paint, and the ball was getting knocked away. It was being deflected, and all of the things that Purdue purposely put into their game plan to avoid, and some ways they wanted to counter what McNeese was trying to do defensively, they were able to do because they saw what Clemson failed to do.
Right. And I mean, it was just, like you said, just huge credit to the scouting on both the defense and the offense, and just saw what they did to Clemson and were prepared absolutely. So all Purdue rolling. And
so Purdue, after Clemson scored a mighty 13 points against this McNeese defense in the first half, Purdue scores 38.
Yeah, that's a lot better.
And it wasn't a fluke, because what did they score the second half? 38 more.
One of those even symmetrical box scores.
Yeah, 38-38, although they were outscored in the second half, 42-38, because they didn't finish.
No, they did not. And they had a lot of turnovers, actually. But,
horrible game for turnovers. In fact, that's got to be a little bit of a concern when you've got Houston next.
A team that clean it up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, a team that feasts off other teams' mishandling of the basketball. And they put a lot of pressure on you. And Braden Smith was the biggest culprit. Braden Smith did not have a great game handling the basketball. Now, I thought, overall his game was all right. He had 5 assists, moved the ball pretty well, but he cannot turn it over 8 times.
No, and it kind of seems like the plan has been to for other teams to kind of try and shut Braden Smith down and make the other guards and stuff produce more and shoot more. But they still found a way to get around that. So good stuff.
Yeah, 8 turnovers. I mean, that's just a sick number for Braden Smith. It's got to make you feel sick if you're a Purdue fan, because especially knowing you've got Houston coming up next.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be a tough one. We're going to be previewing that matchup a lot more ahead of Friday, I believe.
Yeah, and, you've got a Houston team that is number 1 in the country in defensive efficiency, and I think they're like top 5 offensive efficiency. I mean, it is a complete basketball team according to the KenPom analytics. But where they are so efficient offensively is in transition off opponents' turnovers, because they really do get in your grill and force you to make mistakes. And they would rather get beat on a dribble and have help side rotation than to give you space to have a comfortable dribble no matter where you're at in the half court. So they're going to get up on you, and they're going to force Braden Smith to be highly pressured, maybe even double-teamed and trapped. And he's going to have to be able to handle it much better than he did against McNeese State, because Houston's much better defense with even bigger, better athletes. And it's going to be a tough night for Purdue. And it is a night, by the way.
Yes.
Or should I say early morning, because the game probably will fall into Saturday morning, since it isn't scheduled to start until 10:10 p.m. in Indianapolis. All right, we've got some comments coming in. Be curious to see who takes over the helm at Iowa. Well, we already know that is going to be Ben McCollum.
Yep, going away from the Bulldogs.
Sean Miller heading to Texas.
Don't take my updates now.
Oh, am I slowly picking through your updates? I'm just reading what our listeners are saying. Chris Beard, Ole Miss, will bust a few Final Four brackets this weekend. That's a prediction from Justin. I got Michigan State, Florida, Duke, and Tennessee going to the Final Four. Duke is the champion on Justin's bracket. And that's not our former Justin. That's a listener, Justin.
Yeah.
All right, 260-447-8500, or you can follow us on Facebook today at Facebook Live, facebook.com/1380 The Fan. And we do want to get caught up with what's happening in the world of sports and find out whatever headlines we haven't already covered. So here it comes with Adam Lundy.
Well, as you did hear from our listeners, Xavier's Sean Miller has reached an agreement to be the next head coach of the Texas Longhorns. Miller will replace Rodney Terry, who was informed Sunday that he would not return to lead the Texas program. Miller is a veteran head coach who has led teams to 13 NCAA tournament appearances in his career, including in 2 of the past 3 seasons at Xavier. Minnesota has announced the hiring of Colorado State's Nico Medved as their next men's head basketball coach. Medved's season ended on Sunday night with Colorado State losing 72-71 at the buzzer to Maryland in the second round of the NCAA tournament. The Rams had won 11 straight games, including a Mountain West Conference tournament championship and a victory over the Memphis Tigers in the first round of the tournament. The Indiana Fever have signed Jillian Aline for training camp, the team announced today. Aline has played for the Minnesota and Washington in the WNBA as well as in Israel. She most recently averaged 18.6 points, 13.8 rebounds, 2.5 steals, and 1.4 block shots per game, playing overseas in Turkey. She played at Oregon and was a Pac-12 Co-Player of the Year in 2016. And the Indiana Pacers are in action tonight. Guard Benedict Mathurin is listed as questionable with a left ankle sprain on the injury report for tonight's home game against the Timberwolves. But all-star point guard Tyrese Halliburton is no longer on the injury report after missing 3 games this week with lower back soreness. Timberwolves all-star guard Anthony Edwards is also listed as questionable with a right thumb laceration. Also, real quick, the women are in action during the March Madness tournament right now, and just checking in, I can tell you that Oklahoma has a 18-11 lead over the 6-seeded Iowa Hawkeyes. Coming up at 5, the 5-seeded Alabama Crimson Tide takes on the 4-seeded Maryland Terrapin women. That's your stories.
We talked about men's basketball pretty much following chalk, as a lot of the favorites have advanced into the Sweet 16. Women even more so. And what we're seeing is the separation of talent between a top seed and a lower seed in the women's game is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of tweets that kind of say the women's tournament doesn't officially start until the Elite 8.
Yeah, I mean, you've got 40, 50, 60-point blowouts that are taking place in the first round because there is such a distance between the elite teams and the teams that survive some of the smaller mid-major conferences, and it's almost embarrassing that ESPN has to find a network because you can only go down to ESPN2 and ESPNU. There is not an ESPN Z, and there is not an ESPN 8 or 9.
No Ocho.
No Ocho. I mean, there's a couple of those games where you almost feel like they have to bury them somewhere so they don't have to televise them because they're not worth being on TV. They just are not competitive enough to make it on TV. One of the only teams, in fact, in the women's bracket that advanced is a team out of the Summit League.
Shout out to the Summit. Yeah,
number 10 seed.
Yeah.
They're the lowest seed, actually, that won a first-round game. We'll tell you more about the women's tournament, also what's ahead for the women's NIT, which features our very own Purdue-Fort Wayne Mastodons. Also coming up, we'll talk a little high school basketball. We wrapped up our coverage over the weekend. We'll tell you how, why, and what. Also, hour number 2, Don Fisher joins us. It's another day of our 15 minutes with Fish. No games to talk about, but we do have a new coach to talk about. We have a transfer portal to talk about, and we've got Indiana women's basketball that we talk about. So we'll have that coming up for you at 5:20 this afternoon. You can connect with us 2 ways. Facebook at facebook.com/1380 The Fan. We are streaming live video right now. Also, you can find us on our Parkview Sports Medicine text line at 260-447-8500. Questions, comments, or suggestions, fire away. It is a Monday edition of the Sports Rush on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. Mastodons did have another name that entered the portal today. Keaton Dukes entered the portal. Basically a mop-up guy that just didn't get an opportunity. He was deep on the bench and played a couple of minutes in some blowout games, but he probably is looking. It's his last year of eligibility, probably looking for an opportunity where he can get on the court, be more of an impact player, and he might have that at a lower level. So best of luck to Keaton on his pursuits. I mean, losing a guy like that, you wish him the best. I mean, they had their shot for 3 years to try to crack the lineup or try to get some minutes, just couldn't get it done. And so I totally understand. Before his college career is over, he wants to play some ball.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Totally an understandable decision. Wish him all the best and hope he can thrive somewhere.
Now, some of the guys, I don't know the story, but Chandler Cutrell, who was a productive player, had a start this year. He was a guy that played significant minutes in rotation, especially when Eric Mulder was out injured, a 6'8" forward. He announced a couple of weeks ago that he was entering the transfer portal, and I was a little surprised by that. I thought he fit in pretty well with the style of offense, but he was from Baltimore, and sometimes you want to get a little closer to home to end your college career, so maybe your family that hasn't had a chance to see you because he played in San Antonio before he played in Fort Wayne. So he's played his entire college career a pretty good distance from Baltimore, so maybe that's it. I don't know, haven't talked to him. But, of course, the big name that entered the portal was Jalen Jackson, Fort Wayne's own, came home after playing his freshman year at UIC, had a really good year a year ago, had a significantly better year this past year. Things kind of faded drastically down the stretch for Jalen, but he still ended up with about a 19-point-per-game average for the Mastodons this year. But he obviously is in the portal, and a lot of schools are, I guess, having interest, some big schools. You've got Michigan, you've got Nebraska, Virginia Tech, Butler, among others that have already reached out. Now, the process is going to be now they can contact you. So
right.
they reach out, they find out kind of what you're looking for, then they do their due diligence, they figure out where you would be playing in their offense, what kind of opportunities they've got to distribute minutes. Are you going to be a guy that's going to get the minutes you're looking for? Because a lot of times that first inquiry might just be, are you looking for a backup role? Are you going to be satisfied getting a backup role? Do you want to be a role player? Do you want to be a starter? When you go to your next school, what do you expect to be? He might not be a starter at some of those schools. He might be a 7th or 8th man, and if they end up with a good year in the portal, he might be an 8th or 9th man. You don't know. There's a lot of unknowns when you enter the portal. Everybody wants to be part of the portal. But the reality is there's a lot of unknowns. And you've got to make a quick impression, a fast impression, and hope that 1 year goes every bit as well as you're expecting it to go. And I You know, I got nothing against Jalen as a basketball player. I think he's immensely talented. Will his game translate? You know, you look at Bryson Scott, who was a great player that played a very similar style to what Jalen plays. And Bryson Scott was kind of the opposite. Went to Purdue, couldn't get on the floor.
Simple as that. And, it's like you said.
You got the best of the best you're competing with every day at practice.
Yeah, and it's like you said, are you willing to accept a lesser role potentially if you want to play for a more powerful conference program? But we'll see.
Are you coming for the charter flight?
Yeah.
Or are you coming because you expect to start at a bigger program? And that's one of the reasons why a lot of NBA scouts or professional scouts or NBA executives, that's why a lot of times they will tell you that in many cases you're better off playing in a smaller level at a mid-major where you're going to dominate, where you're going to have the ball in your hands. You're going to have an opportunity to showcase your skills a little bit more, where, you know, if he goes to Michigan and things don't work out, or if he goes to Nebraska and ends up having trouble getting court time, look at Connor Essegian. And he didn't even transfer freshman to sophomore year, but look at the difference in his role from freshman to sophomore years. He never expected that after a really good freshman year where he was getting significant minutes, was averaging, I think, 5 points a game or something like that, that coming back for his sophomore season, he might not get on the floor in certain games. And if he did, it would be the mop-up time, the last 2 or 3 minutes of a contest. He didn't see that coming. You just don't know with these big programs because there's so much talent out there. And with the transfer portal, big schools can just go out and start bringing them in.
Constantly coming in, and your spot is constantly at threat every single season. Just for reference, just for a scope of scale of how much is going on in the transfer portal, as of 34 minutes ago, 600 players have entered the transfer portal today.
Wow.
So that's from 247 Sports.
That's an average of about 2 per Division I program.
Yeah.
And I actually, last year it was, 11 or 1,200? Maybe even a little bit more than that?
Yeah, but, I mean, this is like, day one of it officially being open?
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, we might get 1,200, 1,300 again. And, some people think that this process is really killing mid-majors because as soon as you have a player that develops the kind of talent that can lead you to success, they're going to want to go off and start finding where their opportunity is for them personally, and it leaves the actual school or program in a bit of a hole. There's a lot of talent that fills up 360 teams in college basketball. You have to be a really elite recruiter. You've got to get the best of the best, and you've got to replace who you've lost. And the Mastodons have had some fortunate situations. Last year, Trey Lewis, who became a big offensive threat down the stretch for the Mastodons, he was sitting on Loyola of Chicago's bench, not getting an opportunity. Mastodons got him, a 6'5", 6'6" guy, wiry frame, a wing-type player, and he struggled defensively early in the season. He improved on that as the season went on, but there was never a doubt about his offensive capabilities. And then you get a guy like Rasheed Bello that wasn't even playing Division I basketball. He was at Wisconsin Parkside playing Division II basketball and ends up coming in and having 2 all-league type seasons. You don't know where that rock is that you've got to turn it over to find the prize, but they're out there. And yes, you're going to have a roster at the power conference level that's not going to be real heavy on freshmen unless they're the elite of the elite. What it is it's going to be a lot of junior and senior transfers, and they're always going to be replenishing. It's kind of like you go to the grocery store and you buy all the things that are marked down because their expiration date is in the next couple of days. Right?
Right.
Because you don't need to plan next week's meals. You're planning for next season. That's it. You're putting together a roster that's going to last you for a year, and then you're going to go out and do it again. That's just what the power conference teams are doing. And it works for some. Sometimes it doesn't work as well. See Kansas?
Yeah, see Kansas, see Indiana. Not to...
Yeah, I mean, Indiana didn't exactly mesh.
They spent a lot of money to not make the tournament.
Right, and bring in guys that individually looked like good pieces, but they didn't fit together.
Sure. And I think it's easy to say, the transfer portal is hurting mid-majors, but the fact is, I think it's almost evening out the playing field a little bit, because you do have those really outstanding players at mid-majors going to Power 5 conferences, but you also have these Power 5 players who, may not be the best player on their team or their third best player on their team, but they're the fourth or fifth, and they're a really good player, and they want to get more playing time, so they sometimes go to mid-majors.
Yeah, all of a sudden you get a guy that spent a couple of years at a Big Ten program, hasn't seen enough court time, and they want to go find an opportunity where they can be one of the big dogs.
So it almost has a way of evening itself out. It's like transfusion a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's an evolution a little bit of college basketball, but the key is, when you lose somebody like a Jalen Jackson, can you go out and find that guy that's going to be the fit and play well at the mid-major level? But if you look at a lot of the mid-major conferences, the teams that made it into the dance, they were heavy on transfers.
Just look at the Horizon League, Robert Morris. That's a great example.
Robert Morris, one holdover,
yep.
and then the whole roster was built with transfers. Youngstown State, a completely new roster, but a really good team.
Very good.
And then you look at teams that relied primarily on players that came back. Purdue, Fort Wayne, Northern Kentucky, Wright State. 3 examples of teams that relied very heavily on their core that returned, and they didn't win the conference. So, it's not about having the experienced team that's been there, done that. It's about who can hit the best home runs out of the transfer portal. And it's that way for the big schools. It's that way for mid-majors. Got somebody who is talking about Jalen Jackson, possibility going to Nebraska. I've talked to a number of people about that, because last year I know Jalen Jackson was hoping to hook up with Connor Essegian. And that hookup would have been in Fort Wayne. But unfortunately for Connor Essegian, or fortunately for Connor Essegian, unfortunately for the Mastodons, the money was just way too much at Nebraska. They were under pressure to replace a lot of key players. Tominaga was one of them.
Oh, yeah.
And so he had an opportunity he really couldn't pass up at Nebraska. And so that uniting of Jackson, Essegian, 2 best friends, didn't happen. But it could happen this year. In fact, I've already seen Connor Essegian making a little comment out there on X about Jalen Jackson.
Uh-oh.
I think he pulled it, though, a short time. Probably can't get caught tampering.
He's done that a couple times.
Can't get caught tampering, but I think he, did one of the eye emojis or something.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I'm sure Nebraska's in the game.
I can tell you, as of 5 hours ago, there was a tweet said Nebraska is in the mix with, I hate this, Nebraska is in the mix with IPFW point guard transfer Jalen Jackson. The Huskers' recruitment is being led by Jackson's lifelong friend, Connor Essegian.
Yes, it is.
3 hours ago, Connor retweeted it. He said, major throwback, family, with the heart hands emoji. So it's he's laying it on thick.
Now it's not tampering because the portal's open.
Now he's laying it on heavy.
Yeah. But
IPFW point guard.
IPFW. You know what? That's second or third that I've seen that's put IPFW. There is no I in PFW.
Get it right.
260-447-8500, 260-447-8500, the Parkview Sports Medicine text line. Also, you can follow us today on Facebook. We're streaming the show at facebook.com/1380 The Fan, and you can leave comments there as well. Plenty more coming up, including Don Fisher, who will join us in our second hour for our 15 Minutes with Fish. This is the Sports Rush on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM. A lot of one-sided basketball in the women's tournament, and it's continued today. And it's not good for the Big Ten because they're on the wrong side of the blowouts.
Yeah, Iowa had a lead early on Oklahoma. It's a 3-6 matchup, but ever since it's just been Oklahoma coming towards halftime now, 38-24.
And Michigan State got thumped.
Yeah.
Illinois got thumped.
Yeah.
It's been not a good day for Big Ten basketball. And in fact, I don't know if Big Ten basketball, I think, falls well behind SEC. It used to be ACC followed by SEC in my mind. Now I feel like SEC basketball has kind of taken a little higher step over the ACC.
Definitely.
But you've got UConn out there that's part of its own deal, and then you've got South Carolina, elite. Big Ten, you've got USC and UCLA, but do we even count them? I mean, it's hard to even include them when you talk Big Ten basketball because it's like, really, they're part of our conference now.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, if you're a Big Ten fan, you can claim them. That's for sure.
Notre Dame is part of the ACC. Where you have Duke, you have Notre Dame, you have North Carolina State. That's got some solid basketball, but it's been a lot of blowouts. I mean, a lot of teams have been just getting smacked around by in the women's tournament. They're actually playing today because they're like 1 day behind.
Really?
The men. So today is their completion of the round of 32.
Yes.
And then they will be heading to the Sweet 16 coming up next weekend. I think it stays 1 day behind, but then they have a very short, quick turnaround between their Elite Eight into the Final Four, and then when the Final Four begins.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. I mean, just looking at how much of a domination it's been for these top seeds up against the lower seeds, unfortunately, for both Big Ten women's teams earlier today. They were the lower seeds. It was 83-49 for North Carolina State over Michigan State, and number one Texas beat Illinois by nearly 20 points. We're seeing another case of that now with 3-seeded Oklahoma beating up on 6-seeded Iowa.
You know who was competitive, and it surprised me a bit, but they competed.
Who was that?
Indiana. They lost, as expected, to South Carolina at South Carolina, where
that's
UConn's tough. Like the only team that's beaten them in the last 75, 80 games.
Years.
Yeah. But Indiana was competitive. They kept the game kind of interesting, but they just could not get over the hump. The problem for Indiana, they just don't have the scorers.
Sure.
I mean, Sydney Parrish has to play above her real limits. I mean, it's she's a nice player, but she's not the go-to number one scorer.
Yeah, and South Carolina, and not only are they good scorers, is they're just got the height and the size, too. I thought they did a very good job of defense, as they're known to do.
Well, and they can take advantage on the inside because that's where Indiana is weak. They never really did replace Mackenzie Holmes.
No.
They're All-American post. 260-447-8500, the Parkview Sports Medicine text line. Also, you can find us on Facebook. We're streaming live from the studio. You can watch the show at facebook.com/1380thefan. Of course, our good buddy Ryan Eaton always weighing in someplace or the other. Usually, Ryan is posting on X.
Yeah, X/Twitter.
Today, he found us on Facebook. He said another great thing about the tourney, gives these coaches that nobody knows about a chance to show what they can really do, opens the door for a big break. I don't think anybody that was hired, and there's been a number of recent hires, was hired because of what they did in the tournament. I think they were all destined for the jobs they got prior to their appearance in the tournament. In other words, Darren DeVries, he's already said that these discussions took place during the regular season to become the next Indiana coach. You have Ben McCollum. Okay, Iowa, they sought after DeVries. When DeVries told them no, they knew who their next guy in line was going to be, regardless of anything that was seen in the tournament. And Sean Miller would have been the coach at Texas, regardless of what Xavier did, whether they got in, didn't get in. Sean Miller was heading to Texas. And the other one is Chris Mack, which... kind of interesting. His name is being thrown about as the top prospect to take over at Xavier. So I guess what goes around comes around with Sean.
It's the
Sean
coaching
Miller.
Carousel, yeah.
Sean Miller coming back to Xavier, going to Texas. Now you got Chris Mack coming in to replace Sean Miller. But yeah, it's the coaching carousel. And then the coach at Colorado State. Now we got to talk about what happened last night.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to talk about Maryland and Queen, whether or not Derek Queen, is it Derek Queen?
I do believe so.
Because for some reason that sounds like Dairy Queen, and I'm like, I just want to make sure it's not my appetite that's making me say Derek Queen.
I think you're good.
It does sound like Dairy Queen, though.
It does sound like Dairy Queen. Oh, now you're gonna make me hungry.
Derek Queen got the ball.
Yeah, you're good.
It looks like he might have enjoyed a Dairy Queen or two.
He's a big boy.
He's built like I am. We both enjoyed a
dilly bar or two.
Yeah, something. But anyway, he got the ball top of the key, and immediately took off left side of the lane and headed down the lane. Here's what everybody is raving about. He traveled. Everybody wants to say he traveled. Oh, they're miserable today because they can't believe the officials missed what in their mind was an obvious travel. I watched it in slow motion. And it's much closer. If anybody wants to tell you it's 3 steps, hogwash. It's not 3 steps. Because the last dribble hits the ground, he's taking that step that you're counting as 1, and the ball has not been fully secured. Now, I know in the NBA you've got the different rule where you get 1 extra step while you're securing the ball. You don't have that in the NCAA. I understand that, but still there is some leniency, and we've seen it across college basketball over the last year or two, that there is a little more leniency to the travel call. But I would say, given the benefit of the doubt on that dribble where he's planting what was his right foot near the foul line. Okay, then as he secures the ball, he takes the left step, goes back to the right step, and then launches for the shot. 2 steps plus the launch. Yeah, maybe by the book, that is supposed to be a travel. But how many times have you seen in college basketball? Because I think a lot of the people that are complaining about this aren't religiously watching college basketball this year. I think what they're doing is they're tuning in like a hawk watching these NCAA tournament games and then immediately want to jump on a rule that might have applied when they played 20 years ago, but it doesn't apply as much now. Rules don't even necessarily have to change for them to be interpreted differently. Okay, and so in this case, you probably could have called travel, and probably nobody's going to say you're wrong.
It's just the moment.
It's the final play of the game.
And I don't like being the person sometimes that says you can't call that there because if it's a foul, it's a foul. But at that point, when it's that close to being a travel or not, I don't know.
But it's also a play that all year long we've seen Euro steps, we've seen step throughs where someone gets to the basket, gives a pump fake, and then takes a 1-2 step to get a layup. Mm-hmm. It happens all the time. I'll tell you what, we've got a couple of players on Purdue Fort Wayne women's team that have perfected that move. Okay, Sydney Graber, Amelia Bromenschenkel, I can call them out. Nobody's listening right now. It's not going to change the game tomorrow night. But they've perfected where they give the fake and then they take a 1-2 step to step through past the defender and then go for the layup. So I am not going to sit here and say, obvious travel, this one's on the refs, Colorado State got shafted. I'm not going to say that because here's the other part of it that nobody wants to bring up. Go watch the replay. Queen is getting fouled, man. He's getting fouled. The Colorado State defender is riding him with his body as he's trying to drive down the left side of the lane. And this is not just vertical and establishing a vertical plane. No, he is actually forcing his body into Queen to try to push him away from the basket, which is why Queen had to fade back to take the shot, because he was being pushed away from the basket by the body of the defender. There was a foul that could have been called. They didn't call that either. They let it go. Let him play. Let him decide the ball game. And I'm fine with that. Now, if it's something blatant that they call all year long, and all of a sudden in the biggest moment of college basketball, you swallow the whistle, those are the types of things I get upset about. But this was one of those judgment calls that could have gone either way. Roger Ayers, who was the official, one of the best officials in college basketball, if not the best official in college basketball, he let him play it out.
Sometimes you just got to let him play it out, and especially in a big game, big moment like that, especially when both players are both going at it. And like you said, there could be a call either way.
2 days earlier, Roger Ayers went viral in a video where he ran down the sideline last minute of the game. I can't even remember what game it was. But he was running down the sideline, and he scuffed his feet like he found a wet spot. Do you remember this? Did you see this video?
I did, yeah.
And he pretended like he found a wet spot on the floor, blew the whistle to call the play dead. The only reason he did that, there was no wet spot on the floor. he saw that there was one sub who had not made it into the game because he was coming in for a free throw shooter who missed the foul shot, right?
Right.
He wanted to give that kid his opportunity to get on the court and play in an NCAA tournament game. And so just, that's great awareness by an official to come up with a reason to blow a play dead and let this kid then come into the game.
Yeah, this referee definitely feels like he knows when to blow his whistle. I feel like if you're going to allow the contact on that queen drive, then you also have to allow a little bit of a step or something, whatever you want to call it. To me, it was borderline on whether or not it truly is a travel. I would not. I mean, if you wanted to call it a travel, I wouldn't have sat there and argued against it being a travel. But I'm not going to argue for it being a travel either, because there were two things at play. Number one, it was two guys battling out a final possession, mano a mano. One guy was fouling. One guy might have gotten away with an extra half step. So what? That is still one hell of a difficult shot. Still to make the shot,
to fade back at a tough angle and bank it in.
Oh, I love the off the glass.
Oh, man, going retro with the bank shot.
That's fun stuff. I'll let you get to this text real quick before we go to break. They say, any basic basketball rules knowledge when you learn the game, travel is a basic. That comes before a foul. So they're basically saying the foul's irrelevant because the travel came first.
But I'm not saying he traveled.
No. So there we go.
But I'm not saying he traveled. What I'm saying is he's being ridden by the defender.
Sure was.
And the officials weren't going to call a foul, and they didn't call a travel. And I heard one analyst say, you know why it's not traveling? Because the referee didn't blow his whistle and tell us it was traveling. And that's what determines whether or not it's traveling, is if the official calls it.
And we got a more exciting ending, too. I think the only people that would have been happy if a foul had been called in that situation is anybody who's rooting for the upset.
Unless you bet the under on buzzer beaters for the NCAA tournament. Because the over-under on buzzer beaters for the NCAA tournament as a futures bet before the tournament began was plus minus 0.5. That means if there was a buzzer beater, and a buzzer beater is defined by a shot in the last second that was either in the air or in the bucket when the horn sounded. And I think this applies. That then it becomes one, and it's the over that hits. And we had not had anything with any kind of a dramatic finish up until that bucket. I'm all for it. I'm with you, Roger.
There you go. Shout out to
Roger.
Shout out to the texter that also let us know that it was Ethan Morton that was guarding Derek Queen on that possession.
Was it really?
Yes,
Former Boilermaker?
Yep. I
knew he played for Colorado State, but I didn't notice from the replay and I watched the replay 3 or 4 times. I'm surprised I didn't recognize that was Ethan Morton.
There you go.
When we come back, we'll also let you hear what Colorado State's coach had to say about that final play. And we've got Don Fisher joining us for our 15 Minutes with Fish. That's at 5:20. It's all part of a Monday edition of the Sports Rush on 1380 The Fan and 100.9 FM.